This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town in northeast Mississippi called Columbus, and sometimes I write about the rest of the state. Today I am going to talk about a myriad of things. This is episode 8 in the Columbus Housing Authority fiasco, and let's just dig right in. I discussed a little bit about expenses and how the Columbus Housing Authority appears to spend money like a drunken sailor on liberty. But let's go back to those roofing companies that they spent an extravagant amount of money with. On October 30th of 2023, Bama Roofing Company did the William Roberts site replacement roof for $179,654. And then the William Roberts Terrace had to have another roof put on 6 months later on March 14th, 2024, and it was for $144,000, and this time it was put on by J&H Construction. There are others that are often used. For instance, Connerly Construction out of Jackson is a licensed company in Mississippi. They do quite a bit of work around the state, and they end up here in Columbus with some of the bids from the Columbus Housing Authority. But I want to talk about Bama Roofing. Bama Roofing is also called Page Properties. It's owned by Alan Page. It's located in Tuscaloosa, and what's interesting is I cannot find that it's licensed in the state of Mississippi. And what's even more interesting is that over at the building inspector's permit office, they don't have them listed either. The other is J&H Construction. Now, I haven't found a lot about them either. I have not been able to locate that they have a Mississippi license, and neither have the people in the building inspector's office when I went to look. Now, none of the companies that have been doing the roofing have pulled a permit for a building inspector's permit. So that's a little bit on the iffy side to me. I'm not sure why. And more importantly, I'm not sure that's a good idea that they don't have those building permits pulled. The other thing is I'm concerned that there are unlicensed contractors potentially doing work here in Lowndes County on homes that have some of our most vulnerable population, especially in the senior community. And I'm just curious, who approves this in the Columbus Housing Authority, and who's overseeing these projects when they are done? I don't think it's our housing director, Robert Graythree, and it doesn't sound like it's Rusty Walker because he's down in Gulfport. So who's watching the work that's being done, and who's checking it in, and where's the review of the work once it's completed, and who's doing that? It's not clear. Now, I want to address a couple of things. So I asked for a FOIA request. It is a good bit of content, but it is not that over the top. It's a pretty normal FOIA request. But what I find interesting is that the Columbus Housing Authority or their attorney, although it's signed by the director, let me just read the letter. Dear Shannon, thank you for visiting my office this morning. I appreciate you taking the time to discuss your request. All I did was go in and ask, was he going to email me the content, or did he need a thumb drive from me? That was the depth of our discussion today. As we discussed, I understand you have questions regarding the distribution of the requested public records information. In order to proceed, please bring a factory-sealed USB drive for secure storage of the document. Per your FOIA request number 02-25, the estimated time required to assemble the requested documents is approximately 160 hours. Now, what kind of nonsense is that? At an hourly rate of $44.45, because apparently that's the lowest paid person they have in their office. And this brings the total estimated cost to $7,112.38. This brings the estimated total cost to $7,112.38. Now, keep in mind that this is only an estimate. It takes more than 160 hours. You will be required to make the additional payment. Please let me know if you have further questions or need clarification. In what world does my request take 160 hours to assemble a group of emails and contracts and purchase orders? Everything should be digital. This doesn't make any sense. Here is my response. This is an exorbitant amount and blatantly an attempt to obstruct public view of information that should be publicly available. I feel I have no other choice than to file a complaint with the Office of Shad White and ask that they investigate not only your lack of transparency and candor, but also the entire operation of your office and all contracts and financials. I will also be contacting the proper authorities with HUD at the state and national level to make them aware of this matter as well. This is absolutely outrageous. I did get a return reply. Again, I don't think Mr. Guthrie wrote this. I believe their attorney wrote this, and here it is. I understand your concerns and want to assure you that our office is committed to transparency and compliance with all applicable public records laws. Your request, number 2, copies of all emails, memos, faxes, phone messages or text messages, notes, or other correspondence to or from all Columbus Housing employees and or board members and or member of the public and or contractors and or insurance companies and or underwriters and or any other person or entity where any content of the correspondence concerns the mention of and or originates from Rusty Walker and or Future Spec and or Sheila Hosley. I, regardless of the original subject matter from to present, to include all attachments. The estimated cost and time provided for fulfilling your request are based on the volume of materials requested and the labor required to review, redact, and compile the documents in accordance with legal and regulatory standards. In other words, the lawyer is going to redact everything. This is so wrong. I'm telling you. He continues, these estimates are not intended to obstruct access, but to ensure that the process is handled thoroughly and responsibly. We respect your right to pursue further review of this matter and will fully cooperate with any inquiries from oversight agencies. Our goal remains to provide the requested information in a manner that is both lawful and efficient. If you would like to discuss ways to potentially narrow the scope of your request to reduce time and cost, we are more than willing to assist. I tell you what, Mr. Guthrie, I want the information about Mr. Walker and his scope of his work and how he was hired, and anyone who has had a competitive opportunity to apply for position. And I want to know why Mr. Walker's retainer fee was almost doubled with zero discussion and zero reason why. He went from $2,500 a month retainer to $4,295, and I want to know why. I have a feeling it's because Mr. Guthrie is not competent and cannot do his job, and Mr. Walker is doing the bulk of his work for him. But I shall continue. Let's discuss why I think this is a matter of incompetence. Let's return to the discussion of the Nancy Thomas issue. Nancy Thomas is the name of the person, of the scammer, on the $59,900 check that was sent to Oklahoma for a truck, and that the organization was scammed over. That was almost a year ago. However, on May the 6th of this year, yes, 15 days ago, a check was cut for the Homer Skelton mutual release of $29,955, and it was made out to whom? Nancy Thomas, who is the incompetent rube at the Columbus Housing Authority, who thought it was brilliant to leave Nancy Thomas's name, 1, in the system, and 2, to put it on a check that was related to the Homer Skelton mutual release, which they knew was the name of the scammer. Now, either they're incredibly incompetent, whoever wrote that check is also in on the scam. Now, at some point they realized that they shouldn't have written that check, and it was voided. Now, I want to know, was it voided before or after it was mailed to Nancy Thomas on May the 6th of 2025? The check is 45340, and it was written on May the 6th, 2025. Now, at some point, they note in the ledger that it was sent to the wrong payee, except they have the wrong name beside the wrong payee. It says document recipient Homer Skelton Ford, and a new check was cut to Homer Skelton Ford, check number 45344, on May the 6th, 2025. Was Nancy mailed that check and it was canceled after it was mailed, or did it ever leave the office? Either way, the level of incompetence is untenable in an office this important with this amount of money going through its coffers. Now, do I re-FOIA? Do I reconsider? Or do I go straight to Shad White's office and lodge a complaint? Or ask for Rusty's contract and narrow the scope of my request and play their game? Because here's what I really want to know. I want to know about the emails between Guthrie, Walker, and the Housing Authority. I want to know what Rusty's contract looks like. I'll settle for 2023 and 2024. And I want all the amendments. I want to know the scope of his work. I want to know if there was a competitive selection. I want to see his performance reviews, and I want to know what's their emergency procurement method. I want to know what is his current contract. How long is it for? How much is it for? And I want to know, are all the RFP bids and criteria selection process they are using. More importantly, I want to know who gets the bids back from contractors, prospective contractors, and who opens those bids, who witnesses the opening of those bids, and what is the process for selection. Yes, I am really pissed about this, and I'm not afraid to say that. $7,000 for a reasonable request about information that should be publicly available is not a viable number. Let's also touch on the fact that the CHA still does not have their website up. That means that website will be down Monday for over a month. No changes have been made, no changes have been proposed. Nothing explains why that website went down 2 hours and 4 minutes after I called and asked their FOIA request process and where I could find it on their website. This is absolutely something worthy of investigation beyond myself. You too can do a FOIA request. Why don't you start asking questions? Start a Freedom of Information Act request. I would ask a FOIA request for information that should be readily available to the public. And I would probably start with the great truck fiasco, and I would keep going until we know, who is this Rusty Walker? Why is he working for our Columbus Housing Authority when he is an elected official in a town that's 3 times the size of Columbus on the Gulf Coast? He is Rusty Walker, the Ward 4 councilman in Gulfport. He is also the owner of Future Spec, and you can figure out who old Rusty is and why he's so involved in Columbus. He doesn't live here. He doesn't visit here. He just takes our money and he does the work that our executive director of our Columbus Housing Authority should be doing. And yes, I am angry and I am disgusted and I am absolutely gobsmacked at this ploy by Mr. Guthrie and probably legal counsel to make broad-based decisions on how much this is going to cost, how many hours it takes, and absolutely, there has been no discussion with the board. He only sends out an email once he announces what that price will be, and his board is not involved in the process in any way that I can see. And this is absolutely obfuscation and obstruction of trying to find information that should be readily available to the public. You should be angry too. It is time to call the Columbus Housing Authority and write to the board members, Martin Andrews, Bo Harrison, Worley Bird, and Richard Gray, and tell them that this is outrageous. I want to thank you for coming on my podcast, Tom Bigby Tales. Until next time.